Hello, thank you for tuning into the Natural Health Rising podcast. My name is Rachel Smith. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I've helped hundreds of people naturally reverse symptoms of autoimmune diseases and other health challenges, from digestive issues to hormone imbalances. And in these weekly episodes, you're going to learn from myself and top health experts from around the world about functional medicine and holistic health tips to help you rise to your healthiest, happiest self. Today, I have Hannah Went with me, and we are going to dive into all things epigenetics. Hannah has a lifelong passion for longevity and breakthrough disruptive technologies that drive radical improvement to the human condition. She attended the University of Kentucky and graduated with a degree in biology. During that time, she had multiple research internships studying cell signaling and cell biology. After graduation, she worked for the International Peptide Society as their director of research and content. Through work in the integrative medicine industry, Hannah saw an opportunity for methylation-based age diagnostics and started Tru Diagnostics in 2020. Tru Diagnostic is a company focusing on methylation array-based diagnostics for life extension and preventative healthcare serving functional medicine practitioners. Tru Diagnostic has a commitment to research with over 30 approved clinical trials investigating the epigenetic methylation changes of longevity and health interventions. Since Tru Diagnostic's inception, they have created one of the largest private epigenetic health databases in the world, with over 15,000 patients tested to date. Hannah has since created Everything Epigenetics, where she shares insights on how DNA regulation has an impact on your health. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Hannah, you're the founder of Tru Diagnostic, and you offer a lot of different testing to provide epigenetic information about people's health. So can you just start with some simplicity in breaking things down of what is epigenetics and how does that differ from genetics? Because I think people get what genetics is.
Yes, I love this question as just like a starting point or entryway, because you're right. Most people are going to be more familiar or more comfortable with genetics in that subject. So we'll review that first. And genetics is just your nucleotides, essentially your A's, T's, C's, and G's. So you're getting 50% of those variants from mom, 50% from dad, and these are going to be non-changeable unless you're doing some crazy gene editing. So these are pretty stagnant. We really like to refer to your genetics as more of the hardware of a computer, where epigenetics, on the other hand, we like to refer to it as your software, because epi is actually a Greek prefix. It means above or on top of. So we're just looking on top of the genome. That's all epigenetics is. You know, it sounds a little bit fancier. It's kind of this keyword you're seeing appear on social media. People will use it in a lot of different instances and scenarios, but it just means that we're making modifications to that baseline non-changeable DNA sequence. But there are a couple modifications. I'm sure we'll get into it. Tru Diagnostic measures DNA methylation precisely, meaning, you know, we're really looking at the genes that are turned on and the genes that are turned off. So that's why we like to use genetics, meaning the hardware of, you know, a computer, and the epigenetics controlling that hardware or being the software.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about the current testing that you do offer and what people can expect to learn about themselves when they do these tests?
Yeah, absolutely. So most people, I would say, hear about Tru Diagnostic in terms of aging, the age-related outcomes that we have to offer. And again, that's very, very exciting. We're actually at a point in science and technology where we can quantify your aging process. And that's really important because aging is that number one risk factor for every single chronic disease and death. So if we're actually able to measure this in a way that's, you know, precise, sensitive, accurate, et cetera, then we can actually manage it and reverse those risk factors. But what you're going to get with Tru Diagnostic is kind of an array of reports. So even though you may have heard of us first from aging, we do not like to call ourselves a biological age testing company. We just like to call ourselves an epigenetic testing company, because we are betting on, and just personally as well, epigenetics is really the biomarker of the future. So you can almost report out anything using epigenetics and, again, DNA methylation in particular, if you kind of have those related outcomes, or if you created the algorithms to do so in that fashion. So I don't know if you want me to pause there and give any insight, but I can keep going as well.
Yeah, you can go ahead and keep diving a little bit further into that.
Perfect. Yeah. So we just recently, this is one of the first times I've even ever talked about it on a podcast, released our new omic M age we created with Harvard University. So this is the best biological age ever created to date. And the way in which we created it is very, very unique. So you heard that name omic, right? So we're
Mhm.
gathering different levels of omics. So we use genetic data, we use proteomic data, metabolite data, clinical lab value data to actually power this algorithm. But again, meaning still we're getting all of this outcome information from DNA methylation just being the input, being, a couple drops of blood on a blood spot card. So we're actually able to report out about 36 clinical lab values, proteins, and metabolites. And people are like, how can you get that from just a little tiny blood spot card? But it all comes within the training of the algorithm. So we also do things like even your DNA methylation, CRP, and IL-6. We can
Mhm.
tell you how much you've smoked or drank across your entire lifetime, which, some people don't want to know. And even if you're able to lose weight or not with caloric restriction, along with some kind of risk-related reports, type 2 diabetes, cellular replication turnover, which could be correlated to cancer outcomes as well. So you really get a nice suite of reports with Tru Diagnostic, with the goal, of course, being getting a baseline, making changes, and then seeing a positive outcome, 6 months or 12 months later down the road.
Okay. That's what you typically see timeline wise, is like once people start implementing changes, 6 to 12 months. And I mean, how quickly can someone change their biological age, and also how drastically could they drop that age?
Yeah, I may move this conversation into one of our algorithms specifically. Have you heard of the Deneen pace by chance,
No.
Rachel? The pace of aging metric. So this one is really interesting. We created it with Duke and Columbia University, but it's more like a speedometer. So I always use my hand that way. It's more like a speedometer. So it tells you how quickly you're aging biologically for every one chronological year, rather than just kind of an age, a biological age.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to ask you another question too. Have you seen the Rejuvenation Olympics with Brian Johnson by chance?
I have not.
Does that ring
No.
a bell? Yeah. So if you go to rejuvenationolympics.com,
Okay.
we this is, maybe you may have seen some news articles where it's like the man who spends a lot of money trying to reverse his
You know
aging. Does
what?
that ring a bell
I
now?
have seen this. Yes, he's like his skin looks like butter, and he's like literally
Uh-huh.
both in color and texture. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we actually created the Rejuvenation Olympics with Brian as a way
Uh-huh.
to hold people accountable, right? Because you see, again, social media posts or conferences where people are talking and say, "Hey, I've reversed my aging," and we're saying, "Wait a second, let's actually put it on a leaderboard, and make this a little bit more structured, but create a community so people can share what they're doing to reverse their aging." So whenever I get the question, in what time frame can you reverse it and how much you can reverse it, I always point people to that leaderboard, because we
Okay.
actually quantify the percentage of change from baseline. So you can see there, kind of at the top, I think the one that's changed the most is maybe around 25%. And Brian no longer holds that first kind of position there in the leaderboard. So you can change that pace of aging in particular by about 25%, in terms of getting it lower over about a 6 month mark. But again, the pace of aging, I bring that one up. It's the only one we quantify on the Rejuvenation Olympics because it's so precise. You can actually retest it every 2 to 3 months if you really wanted to. So to sum that up, the criteria to be on the leaderboard, to even be considered, is just going to be 3 Dunedin pace test, with the first and the third one being at least 6 months apart. So we can quantify that exact change. And then hopefully you make enough of a change to actually be, one of the top. I think we have the top 25 on there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And these people share their information on how they got this as well, or this is just kind of like the yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are, redoing the website right now. This is actually perfect timing too. Again, something I haven't shared, I don't think, with anyone. So probably in the next, hopefully 2 weeks or so, we're changing the website to where you can create an account, and it's more like a community. So you can actually drop links, or write paragraphs or post, kind of like Facebook style, Twitter style, Instagram thread style. So
Hmm.
people can actually start to share, because that's the goal here, right? This testing is so new. As exciting as epigenetics is, it's just as equally as frustrating because
Hmm.
we're not exactly sure what changes it. Although we know that it changes and that we can positively benefit from that. So that's why I personally really like Brian Johnson, because everything is public, right? It's on that really, really long web page of his blueprint, where he's starting to share what he's doing, and then people are starting to follow. So I really think it's hopefully at least getting people motivated, again, creating a community, creating a healthy competition as well.
Hmm. Okay. How young have you made yourself? What's your
Yeah.
chronological versus biological?
Yeah, I don't think I've actually posted mine publicly. I just did my physical fitness age on my Instagram page, but I think my omic M age looks pretty good as well. So you want to be in a lower percentile with your omic M age. I think I still may be a little bit older compared to my chronological age. So I'm 26 years old chronologically. I think I may be like 28, 29 according to my omic M age, but I'm still in a really low percentile, like I think the 30th, meaning
Okay.
that most people of my same chronological age even actually have a further accelerated omic M age. So
Right.
um, it's flawed thinking to think in terms of, oh, my biological age is older than my chronological age, that's really bad, or oh, I'm younger than my chronological age, that's really good. We have to compare it to a population to see what's quote unquote average
Hmm.
or normal, right? So we do compare it to the Tru Diagnostic population, which is really competitive. It's about 35,000 people who are extremely healthy and
Mm.
optimizers, so it is hard to test against. But yeah, I was proud of my omic age. It actually looks a little bit lower, so I'm gonna have to post on that and do a review on that soon.
I mean, that makes sense to me because when you think about the world that we live in today, it's like the world that we have is our food is chemically processed. We have many toxins in our environment, and we have so many artificial lights, and we work so hard. And so these things are aging us faster. And I'm sure we'll talk more about some of those things in a little bit.
Mhm.
But that makes a lot of sense to not be hard on yourself of, oh, I'm 29, not 26. But wait a second, other people are probably 40 or something, and you're only a few years ahead. So that's actually a really good thing to take into consideration.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Now I can't say the same about my pace of aging. Pace of aging, remember, is more of what's currently going on. So, like you said, I work really hard. I'm unfortunately very easily, can become easily stressed, just with work and life and being busy, which are all great things.
Hmm.
But my Dunedin pace is personally a little bit higher than where I would want it to be. I did see a reversal in it, but I do try to practice some, stress reduction exercises, breathing exercises, meditation, walking, making time, to de-stress and, come back down from the busyness of everyday life.
Hmm. Well, you've accomplished quite a bit for a 26-year-old, so I would say you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Uh-huh. So based on your research at True Diagnostic, what have been some of the most surprising findings about the relationship between methylation patterns and the aging process?
uh I'll give you maybe more of the lifestyle, more
Hmm.
intuitive things,
Sure.
just because I still think those are extremely powerful. And then can maybe talk about what others would think more exciting when it comes to supplements, medications, and procedural based therapies. But really, the one study that came out at the beginning of this year, at the end of February, published in Nature. It's called the Calorie Randomized Control Trial.
Hmm.
So I can send this to you afterward. It's spelled a little weird. It's Calerie. So I don't know why they spelled it that way. I should have asked kind of the authors on that publication, but it's just a 10% overall caloric restriction in healthy non-obese adults over a 2-year period. And that was really the first ever proof of concept study showing change in that pace of aging. So really, there's two conclusions we can make from it. Number one, again, we're using caloric restriction to validate if these clocks work or not, because we know caloric restriction extends lifespan and even health span actually in animal models. But we can't do that type of study in humans because it would be very inhumane to restrict calories at birth, right? So we're using the clocks. The caloric restriction is validating if the clocks work, and the Deneen pace was really the only one that picked up that change. So omic MH just came out, so we haven't ran omic MH on that data set. But the Deneen pace, that means that's the best one for N of 1 precision-based or personalized medicine, which we kind of already knew or assumed that. And then secondarily, again, caloric restriction, I would say, is the number one proven, published, publicly available recommendation for slowing down the pace of aging, which I know seems hard and difficult. I know when I first heard that term, it seems really scary, like, oh, I have to skip a meal, or what does that mean? And that can be really hard. I think you need a healthcare provider alongside if you want to start practicing that. It can also trigger, eating disorders, any type of baby disorders in the past for some people. So it's, you want to tread lightly in that area. But I think on the positive side, we can use this piece of information as power. So if you are listening and you eat meat, you're a meat eater, a really easy example is switch from traditional breakfast sausage to turkey sausage or turkey bacon. That is already 10% caloric restriction for the day. You're going from like 400 calories with traditional sausage to, turkey bacon or turkey sausage. And that's like 400 calories to like 180 or 200. So you're already at 10% for a 2000 caloric based diet, right? So we just need to change, I think, our thinking around it and just make better eating choices overall, right? And it doesn't have to be as hard as actually skipping a meal. So, and you have better, nutrients going from, one type of breakfast sausage to the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good example and a different way to reframe things.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's a lot of nuances, like the possibility of eating disorders, and what I've seen is women who have menstrual cycles, our hormones are changing all the time. So there's actually specific times that are a little bit better to skip a meal versus other times of the cycle. We need to pay a little bit more attention to the ways we eat than some men. So there are definitely nuances in there as well.
Yeah. The one thing I always say, which I didn't say that time too, is, definitely would not recommend caloric restriction for, again, any woman who's, breastfeeding, pregnant, on their cycle, or any athletes as well who are trying to obviously reach a specific muscle mass goal, or, maybe some other intense kind of physical fitness outcome. Obviously, caloric restriction wouldn't be recommended for them either.
What are some ways what are some other lifestyle habits, I guess, in general, that people are doing that are changing the way that their genes are being expressed?
Yeah. So, besides nutrition, we'll end that one with also saying, things like the Mediterranean diet look better. Brian Johnson, again, not to bring him back up, but the olive oil consumption, right? It goes along with that Mediterranean-based diet. The DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, looks great as well. So that's just less red meat, less sodium, less sugar, sweetened beverages, more fruits, more veggies, legumes, whole grains. So again, rather intuitive. We're currently doing a study with Dr. Joel Furman on the nutritarian diet with the G bombs. So I think it's greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, the other B, and then seeds is the last one. So I forget what the other B is. I usually always do. I think it might be berries.
It might be berries, because those are a lot of antioxidants in berries. I feel like
I think it's berries.
Okay.
You're right. I think it's berries. So someone can fact check us, whoever's listening. So yeah, I think we'll see a better effect even with that nutritarian diet. So besides diet, we already really hinted on less stress, better sleep, quality and quantity. So I track my sleep, using the Whoop. A lot of people do the Aura or Whoop. And then, I saw the Aura ring earlier on you. And then exercise. So definitely exercise, right? We lose muscle mass as we age. So in our 20s and 30s, our main goal regarding just physical fitness in general is keeping on muscle mass. That doesn't mean going to the gym 7 days a week and throwing around weights, right? We want to change what we're doing as well. So I would say, as a good rule of thumb, probably 3 to 4 times a week, minimum, just lifting weights. It doesn't have to be super heavy. It has to be some type of movement, but we like to see a mixture or a variety of movement too. So I've personally recently been trying to incorporate more running, getting my heart rate up. I haven't, done that in a while, so I'm working on that. But things like, cycling, again, yoga, walking, jogging. I don't think we're ever meant to have a, quote unquote rest day where we don't do anything that day, right? When I have a quote unquote rest day, I'm still trying to get at least 10,000 steps or, some type of movement, walking my dog around the block. But again, it doesn't have to be high intensity interval training every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. There's some other things too, just that are rather intuitive regarding lifestyle, Rachel, like no drinking alcohol whatsoever.
Sure.
No
Smoking.
smoking. Yeah. Working on insulin sensitivity has been really huge and correlated with epigenetics in a way. Things like even reducing toxic loads, right? Toxic exposure. And then I know we don't necessarily like BMI as a measurement in kind of the health world today, but it's what we had in the past. So we can still use it in some research. And it is shown that people with a higher BMI have, worse or more accelerated epigenetic aging than those who have a lower BMI as well. So we like to keep a healthy weight, or, again, a good muscle with that body fat composition and muscle mass.
Mm-hmm. There is a specific gene mutation that a lot of people seem to be quite obsessed with. And for some reason, like this last week, I got multiple emails about this from some people, random people and clients like, hey, do you do this testing? The MTHFR gene.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, is this a big deal? Does this really matter? What's your opinion on it? I have opinions, but
Yeah.
what's your opinion?
Well, I'd love to hear yours after, Rachel. But we still get that question. Some healthcare providers and consumers will email us and say, "Oh, you do methylation testing? It's the MTHFR gene."
Right.
It's completely different. First and foremost, right? The MTHFR is a gene, and we talked in defined genetics earlier. So there is a connection, I should say, and I really love this study that I'm about to tell you about because it mixes epigenetics and genetics together. So actually, women in particular who have that MTHFR gene in the 677CC variant have a faster biological aging. They just, learned about that connection in one paper in particular. And again, I can send it to you afterwards. But what they noticed is if they supplement with a methylated cofactor, so they're affecting their methylation cycle, like 5-methylfolate or methylcobalamin, they almost see an instantaneous reversal in that biological age. So
Mm-hmm.
in about, I think, a couple weeks even afterwards. So they only saw that for women, not for men. Because they gave the same dosing to both women and men. So I think if they would have done a little bit of a higher dosing with men probably would have seen that reversal as well. So yeah, the SNPs, the genetic variants that you have absolutely matter and can affect biological aging. That one in particular, we absolutely know because again, it's very popularized. Someone studied that and looked at that actual effect. But
Mm-hmm.
we're measuring something completely different. So I always like to say, DNA methylation is not good or bad. It depends on the location. If we want that gene turned on or off, right? We want some genes turned off, like your oncogenes, your cancer genes, but some turned on, like your tumor suppressor genes. But when people think of the MTHFR and the methylation cycle, they think, all types of methylation is bad, which, isn't necessarily true in our case.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned having some genes turned on and some genes turned off. Are there some common threads that you've seen through testing where people have certain genes turned on a lot that you guys help them work through?
Not yet, I would say.
Okay.
So, kind of on our largest panel, we look at about 1.2 million DNA methylation markers. I don't know anyone, not even Dr. Steve Horvath, who pioneered this work, who can read that with the naked eye, where we say, oh, here's the MTHFR gene. We want this turned off this much. Here's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move forward with this plan. I think that's what will happen in the future. Absolutely.
Okay.
One example is our type 2 diabetes risk report, where we look at 2 out of the 1.2 million markers we test. It's the ABCG1 gene and the phospho1 gene. And we actually want the ABCG1 gene less methylated, so more turned on, and we want the phospho1 gene more methylated and more turned off. I know that one off the top of my head just because it's one of the reports that we offer. So we don't know the thresholds until we have the research behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some genes we're not sure maybe if we want them turned on or turned off yet, until we get more of those kind of dots connected.
Right. Okay. So, supplements. This is something that can be super
Yes.
powerful. As you were just kind of mentioning about MTHFR, oh, they take a methylated vitamin and it immediately changes things for them. Are there supplements currently proving to really move the needle when it comes to improving longevity?
Yeah, I think there are some. And first and foremost, before I go down this list, I want to make it very clear that these are still population-based studies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just because it works even for the population doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So for anyone who's wanting to see how these supplements affect them, I highly, highly recommend doing the before and after Deneen pace, like we kind of chatted on earlier, right? Because it's different for everyone. Your epigenetics are very specific to your environment, right? It's kind of that balance of nature versus nurture. So I just sort of put that out there because I think that's really, really important. And we usually get really excited when people talk supplements and we kind of run with it, and we
Mm-hmm.
may not know the effect that it has on you. But one that may be considered a supplement or medication, depending on where you live, is going to be DHEA. Men are going to do probably 25, 50 milligrams. Women are going to do maybe 5 or 10. Women tend to get more of the hormonal side effects, especially in premenopausal women, younger women. That DHEA is really going to help work on those glucocorticoid receptor elements. So it's going to lower cortisol levels, thus reducing kind of your overall stress load. That DHEA was included in the first ever interventional trial in August of 2019 called the TRIM trial, proving we can actually reverse these markers. So I think DHEA is absolutely huge. Vitamin D has been one of the most studied supplements with epigenetics. It's an easy one, right? But it has been shown before and after. About 4,000, 6,000 IU per day are going to have better effects on your epigenetic aging. The NMN and the NR, the NAD precursors, those look really good as well. Not a clinical interventional trial looking at those, but again, one of the unique things about Tru Diagnostic is we've tested so many people, and most of them are through integrated functional healthcare providers. So we
Mm-hmm.
can look at what people are, saying that they're taking and what that has on the effect of the outcome. So it's a very uncontrolled metadata analysis, but we do see the NR and the NMN looking to be better as well.
Okay.
We really like, this is the last one I'll say, sulforaphane. It's a broccoli extract.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that we love just because it's working on that mTOR pathway, so that mammalian target of rapamycin, which is the same with caloric restriction, where it's inhibiting that growth just a little bit, but not too much to put you in any type of immunosuppression. So we really like the sulforaphane and broccoli extract as well.
Mm-hmm. Years
Those are
ago,
probably the top ones.
those are good ones. Years ago, when I was going through a lot of health challenges and kind of figuring out, I left corporate America and decided, okay, I want to do this. I want to work in holistic health and functional medicine. I was obsessed with making my own broccoli sprouts for years. I would grow them. I was watching all of Dr. Rhonda Patrick's stuff. I feel like she really blew up broccoli sprouts. So I would every single week grow my broccoli sprouts on my counter, put them in the freezer, throw them in my smoothies, put them on my food. And I was really trying to optimize my detox pathways, my hormones, all that type of stuff. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I
yeah,
had never tried that before, so I'll have to look into that.
I mean, obviously you can take supplement forms of these things, but if you're really wanting to do as natural as possible,
Right.
the ones from the grocery stores, it costs so much more. And plus you would, how long have they been sitting inside of the grocery store? They can grow bacteria easily, super cheap to buy a couple of mason jars with the tops on them with the grate so that you can drain the water out. You buy a big bag of seeds. They last for months, and then you have like months of broccoli sprouts that you can make.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah, super
interesting.
easy. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would say one more thing about the DHEA. I think it's great. And then the thing you mentioned about the women who can have maybe hormonal like acne or hair loss or things coming up, I like to look at the Dutch test. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mm.
that. That
Mhm.
looks at the hormonal pathways and how people are breaking down their androgens. And um, with certain people, they're metabolizing some of their androgens more towards the 5 alpha pathway. So if we give them DHEA, they are going to exhibit more of the oily skin, the acne, the hair loss,
Mhm.
and things. But there's a lot of ways to block those pathways. So, like, still giving people DHEA if they really, really needed it, but blocking those pathways with herbs or reducing inflammation, fixing
Mm.
gut health, managing blood sugar as
Yeah.
well. These are a lot of things that can kind of shift that pathway. So then when they take that DHEA, they're not going to experience a lot of those symptoms.
That's good to know. Yeah, I'm familiar with the Dutch test, but definitely not as familiar with it as you are. And I
Mm,
naturally already have kind of that like oily skin, so I can definitively tell a difference when I'm taking even just a very very small dose of DHEA, even like every other day.
mm,
And that's not to go without saying you should still test your lab values, right? See what your levels are. Same with
right.
the vitamin D, right? Um, I I do take vitamin D as well personally, but my levels can ramp up, very quickly, very high. So sometimes I'll even do vitamin D every other day because even though we're saying yes, 4,000, 6,000 IU per day in the epigenetic studies, you still want to do your own testing and make sure that it's right for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you may want to look into like saw palmetto herbs or zinc, reishi mushrooms. Those are some different
Yeah,
things that can block that pathway.
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Mhm. You're welcome. um, are there any misconceptions that you feel in the field that you work in with all of this testing and what we've been talking about so far?
Oh, any misconceptions? Um, you know, I I think people are under the impression is, when they learn something, again, we tend to run with these ideas way too quickly, right? So something I may say that I don't think is a misconception, but maybe just an eye opener for the field and those listening is we will never stop evolving these outcomes,
Hmm.
which makes it hard, and which makes it a little confusing. So when True Diagnostic first opened, we just had kind of what we called our intrinsic and extrinsic epigenetic age, which was the best at that time. However, with this new omic image we released, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, why? Or, I'm not going to pay attention to this one, right? And they're kind of turning their head from it. And I think that's very frustrating. We're going to keep evolving in this field because the goal is to make these algorithms as predictive as possible. So we'll always start to come out with new ones, but we have to be willing. We have to be learning to grow. I'm still learning about the algorithm and exactly what it means. So, as a company, we'll never take anything away from you. We'll still give you the intrinsic and extrinsic if you want to compare longitudinally. But for those listening, just be open to these changes. Be wanting to learn about how these new insights affect your health. Because, one day, maybe fast forward 10 years from now, we'll be able to look at your data that we ran 3 years ago when we first opened and say, oh, wow, they are going to get type 2 diabetes at
Mm,
age 65. If they do these things beforehand, they can actually reverse that risk and they won't get it until they're 85, or they'll never get it in their entire life, right? So I just want people to be open to the fields of epigenetics and DNA methylation and understand that it is absolutely going to change. We have our foot on the gas pedal here, and we're always going to adapt as the new data, as much as the new data will allow us to.
hmm. Yeah, I'm so curious. What made you start this company in the first place and dive into this
Yeah,
area?
yeah, it's kind of an interesting backstory. So I graduated from the University of Kentucky and took a position at a compounding pharmacy right away in Nicholasville, Kentucky, that specialized in pharmaceuticals and peptide products. So they really catered to those cash pay integrative functional healthcare providers. So it created this really niche group. As again, most listeners probably know, the FDA does not like peptides or compounding pharmacies in general. So we became the fourth fastest growing company in the nation. We drew a lot of attention, kind of got the first slap on the wrist from the FDA. So we said, wait a second, everyone always feels good after they take these products subjectively. What can we do objectively to prove to regulators in this space that these are affecting change and giving us better outcomes? So we're like, well, aging is the number one risk factor for every single chronic disease and death. What can we do and how can we track this to prove it? Epigenetics, DNA methylation looks the best way to do that. So although Tru Diagnostic is about 3.5 years old now, we've had the idea, probably 4 years ago, and we were doing this on the side at the pharmacy, just trying to put something together and put some data together. And ended up selling that pharmacy a little bit later and said, you know what, let's just go ahead and create the lab in Lexington. We didn't want to really at first, but now we're very excited that we have full control of the laboratory as well. So we don't outsource to any other third parties. It allows us to do a lot of even genetic third party processing, and we do a lot of university and academic sampling too.
Okay, amazing. What do you think? You've mentioned a couple things actually about this already, but as far as the future goes in this field, is there any other things interesting that you're working on? You mentioned your new testing that you're doing, or anything emerging in the space that you see in the future that's really going to impact health and wellness?
Yeah, you might like this one, Rachel. A lot of companies are going to hopefully, I sit in a really weird spot, I think. Meaning that I spend most of my days speaking with healthcare providers who are taking this test to application, but I also have, my podcast, and we focus on a lot of research at Tru Diagnostic. So it's like, how do we get that research to application? Right? Who is going to use this? So it's just kind of this odd space, but nonetheless very exciting. One of the companies who does a really great job, like a proof of concept of that, is called Dionysus Health. So DIONYSUS, I think, Health. So Dr. Zachary Kaminsky sits on that board, and he's a specialist in epigenetics and mental health. And what they did is they actually created a product, which is like an app on your phone after you test your epigenetics, for testing if mothers are going to have postpartum depression. So you take this epigenetic test through your pregnancy, and it's actually able to tell you and predict to which extent you're going to get PPD and what you can do about it. So basically, where does Tru Diagnostic come into that picture? Well, we run all the samples at our facility. We create the actual algorithm. We create the algorithm in conjunction with them together. And then we work on their tech and, reporting it out and kind of the infrastructure and the workflow piece. So you're going to see more and more companies like that being created because the research is there. It's just, hey, how do we actually take this to application? How do we market it? How do we sell it? And obviously they're a very niche group in terms of, pregnant women. So it's a specific market, but they also have even predictors for things like preterm birth and other outcomes as well.
Wow, that is very cool. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, that one's great. And they have a good team too behind them.
Amazing. If somebody is out there listening and maybe they have never heard like any of this stuff before, but it's piquing their interest, or like, okay, I want to look into this. I want to start with something. What would you recommend with starting for testing and just getting started into starting to improve longevity and overall health with these tactics?
Yeah, I think you kind of named it, Rachel. Just get started, right? Just kind of do it. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want to change something before I get tested, right? I think something that's so exciting is just getting a baseline, right? Don't put too much emotional connection to it. Just get the baseline, get started somewhere. Because a lot of people who actually end up testing with us say, oh man, I wish I would have tested a year earlier, or, right when you all opened, because I was really not healthy then. So I wanted to see that change, right? I wanted to feel good and see that change. So we offer 2 kits. One's that complete kit that kind of includes everything when I was rambling off those offerings at the beginning of this episode. The other is called our True Age Pace, which just includes the pace of aging I mentioned and telomere length. So if you're like, oh, I want to test, but I'm not really sure, and you just want to kind of get your toes wet, do the cheaper test, do the smaller one, and just kind of get a little, pace of aging and telomere length. And then we can make recommendations even for those 2 outcomes as well. But just get a baseline, get started, make a couple changes. Don't make too many at once. Again, I think people, try to stack their supplements and medications. And sometimes people are doing way too many supplements or way too many medications, right? We want to try to back off of that. and go again. I would prefer personally the more natural route or, lifestyle route first, but
Mhm.
also tracking, even in a journal, what you're doing to make sure you know what's making the most difference.
Mhm. That's great advice. Is there anything that you feel like we've missed on this episode that's really important to you?
Oh, I don't know. I think you did a great job in terms of leading the conversation. Just because sometimes it's hard, right? There's so much information to go through. It's like, where
Mhm.
do you start?
Mhm.
Um, again, it's an ever-changing field. Start testing now. Start getting those biomarkers measured. If you are listening and your hormones are in check, your CBC panel looks good, and everything aligns, and you feel quote unquote healthy, whatever that may mean, or quote unquote normal. The next step is always aging. Right? It always comes back to aging being that number one risk factor for most chronic disease and death. So again, start to optimize, start measuring it, start doing those N of one precision based studies on you. But I think from like a definition to what does True Diagnostic do? What do the reports look like? What actually works on reversing this? I think we really covered it all. And if you ever want to do a little bit of a deeper dive, work with a healthcare provider on this testing.
Mhm.
They're experts in this space. We mainly work again with those functional healthcare providers. So even if you're like, I don't even know where to look for a provider, reach out to us. We can refer you to one in your area because they'll be the ones to, again, get a better, more holistic picture of you and your health.
Okay, amazing. Are you open to doing a speed round?
Absolutely.
Okay. They're just kind of health related, some are not. So whatever you want to
Okay.
answer is okay.
Just go
um,
really quick.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
What is one supplement that you could not live without?
Vitamin D.
What's your favorite lifestyle habit or biohack to support healthy aging?
Caloric restriction.
Mm. What are one or two impactful books that you've read?
Oh, this is good. There's True Age, not TRUAGE like our company, but TRUAGE by Morgan Levine. So she's a lead researcher in the epigenetic space. I think that does a really good job talking about epigenetics and aging and the biological age clocks. So for anyone who's ever wanting to read more, the resources are really limited in the epigenetic space, but I think she does a good job with that book.
Okay. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, to go back in time or to pause time,
Oh, okay.
I think. Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Ooh, one of my favorite places that I've been to is Jackson Hole in Wyoming. It's
Okay.
absolutely beautiful. If anyone ever gets a chance to go out there and likes to ski, um, I would definitely pick somewhere colder rather than warmer.
Yeah, yeah, I learned that you love the cold at the beginning of the episode when we were chatting before.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, put me on a beach in the sun, make it hot, put me by the water, and I'll be super happy. Finally, what is one tip that you could leave the listeners with that they can implement this week to help them live a healthier, happier life?
Well, one that we haven't talked about yet is as cliche as it sounds, is treating yourself with kindness, right? Even the way we process our thoughts, if we have that internal monologue, can affect our epigenetics. So if you make a mistake and you're saying, oh my gosh, why did you do that? That was so dumb, or, just getting down on yourself, right? If you're like, oh, hey, it's okay, brush it off, made a mistake, I'll try not to do it again, right? And you just kind of treat yourself with kindness and a little bit of joy in there as well. Yeah, even the way like our connections in our brain and how we talk to ourselves, that can have positive or negative impacts on our epigenetics. So I think that's really important too. It's literally everything, our environment.
Hmm.
So everything, that would be my number one tip.
That's fascinating. Do you know what that normally shows up as on testing?
I would say not yet, no.
Okay. Okay.
In terms of
It
like the actual outcome, but we just know there's the connection there.
kind of like the negativity and the, being down in emotions overall. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was an incredible conversation. Please share any last things, where people can find you, websites, all that type of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So my company we've been talking about is Tru Diagnostic. It's TRU and then diagnostic is singular. So trudiagnostic.com. I also have a podcast, really, I would say doing more interviews with researchers on epigenetics and really what's the next greatest, latest thing in the space. So understanding how epigenetics, you can bring that into your daily life and it can impact your health. And that's just everything epigenetics or everythingepigenetics.com.
Okay. I'll put all those in the show notes for everybody. Thank you so much for being on the
Cool.
show, Hannah.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video and comment, letting me know what you enjoyed and what you want to see more of. Also, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get alerts when new content is coming out and you don't miss any videos. And just a quick reminder that this information is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Please consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, exercise routine, supplements, or medical treatment. If you're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, please reach out to me. And thank you again for watching, and keep striving to become your healthiest, happiest self.